As he entered his new assistant's office, the millionaire froze when he saw the photo in a black frame on her desk. The same photo of his long-lost love who disappeared 25 years ago. The elevator's polished steel doors reflected Sophie Harper's nervous smile as she smoothed her secondhand blazer one last time. 25th floor. The numbers climbed steadily, each ding echoing the rapid beat of her heart. She clutched her worn leather portfolio, a graduation gift from Aunt Grace, and whispered a silent prayer to her mother's memory. "You'd be proud of me today, Mom." The doors slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing the gleaming marble lobby of Grayson Enterprises. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Boston Harbor, while original oil paintings adorned the walls between mahogany panels that probably cost more than Sophie's annual rent. The receptionist, a polished woman in her 40s with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, looked up with the kind of practiced smile reserved for people who clearly didn't belong. "Sophie Harper," she announced, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "I'm here for orientation with the National Opportunity Grant Program." "Of course, dear. Mr. Grayson will see you shortly." The woman's tone was polite but distant, like she was speaking to someone through bulletproof glass. "Please have a seat." Sophie settled into a leather chair that probably cost more than her car and tried not to fidget. She'd dreamed of this moment for years, ever since she'd first read about Grayson Enterprises in a business magazine at the public library. The company's success story had captivated her, a family empire built on innovation and integrity, weathering 3 generations of market storms. What she hadn't expected was the way her stomach twisted with something that felt almost like recognition, like she'd been here before, in another life perhaps. She shook her head, dismissing the ridiculous thought. Nerves, that's all it was. "Miss Harper," a deep voice cut through her reverie. Sophie looked up and felt her breath catch. Standing before her was a man in his early 50s, tall and distinguished with salt and pepper hair, and the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. His gray eyes, intelligent and slightly melancholic, seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed professional facade. Nathaniel Grayson extended his hand, and when their fingers touched, Sophie felt an electric jolt that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with something deeper, more primal, recognition without memory. "Mr. Grayson," she managed, proud that her voice remained steady. "It's an honor to meet you. The pleasure is mine." His voice carried a slight rasp, as if he'd been holding his breath. For a moment, neither of them moved. Hands still clasped, eyes locked in a moment that stretched beyond professional courtesy. Nathaniel was the first to break the spell, clearing his throat and gesturing toward the executive corridor. "Shall we? I like to personally welcome all our program participants." As they walked, Sophie noticed the way he moved, purposeful but somehow weighted down, like a man carrying invisible burdens. The hallway was lined with photographs chronicling the company's history, groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, award presentations, but it was the older photos that caught her attention, particularly one from the 1990s showing a younger Nathaniel with a radiant woman whose dark hair caught the light like silk. "My mother always said this company was built on dreams," Sophie found herself saying, then immediately regretted the personal disclosure. Nathaniel stopped walking. "Your mother was a wise woman, is she? She died when I was 3. The words came easier now, after 22 years of practice. "Car accident. It's just been me and my Aunt Grace ever since." Something flickered across Nathaniel's features. Pain. Recognition. Something Sophie couldn't quite identify. "I'm sorry for your loss. Losing someone that important. It changes everything." There was something in his tone that suggested he spoke from experience. Sophie wanted to ask, but they'd reached his corner office. And the moment passed. The office was stunning. All warm wood and soft lighting, with personal touches that humanized the corporate grandeur. A chess set sat half-finished on a side table, and bookshelves lined one wall, filled with everything from business journals to classic literature. But it was the single photograph on his desk that drew her attention. The same woman from the hallway photo, smiling at the camera with joy, that seemed to illuminate the entire frame. "She's beautiful," Sophie said without thinking. Nathaniel's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around his coffee cup. Yes, she was. Was. The word hung heavy between them, loaded with grief that felt as fresh as yesterday despite the passage of time. "Please, sit." Nathaniel gestured to the chairs across from his desk, his composure carefully reconstructed. "Tell me about yourself." "Miss Harper, what brought you to Grayson Enterprises?" Sophie launched into her carefully prepared story. The scholarship to Boston University, her business administration degree, her determination to prove that circumstances of birth didn't determine destiny. But even as she spoke, she found herself studying his face, noting the way his eyes crinkled slightly when she mentioned her academic achievements, the almost imperceptible nod when she talked about her work ethic. "You remind me of someone," he said suddenly, interrupting her description of her thesis on sustainable business practices. "Oh," Sophie's heart skipped. "Someone you know. Someone I knew a long time ago." His gaze drifted to the photograph on his desk. She had the same determination, the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking. Sophie touched her neck self-consciously, suddenly aware she'd been doing exactly that. "Mr. Grayson," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 10 o'clock is here." The spell broke. Nathaniel straightened, the professional mask sliding back into place. "Of course, Miss Harper. Welcome to Grayson Enterprises. I look forward to working with you." But as Sophie stood to leave, she could have sworn she saw his hand tremble slightly as he reached for the photograph on his desk. That evening, in her tiny studio apartment in Southie, Sophie sat cross-legged on her secondhand couch, staring at the only photograph she had of her mother, Elena Harper. Beautiful, ethereal, with dark eyes that seemed to hold secrets. Sophie had always thought she looked nothing like her mother, but now she tilted her head, studying the image in the lamplight, and for just a moment, she could see what Nathaniel Grayson had seen. The resemblance was subtle but unmistakable. Something in the bone structure, the way light caught her features, the unconscious grace in her posture. "Who are you, Mom?" she whispered to the photograph. "And why do I feel like I'm walking through your ghost at Grayson Enterprises?" Outside her window, Boston hummed with its usual nighttime rhythm, unaware that two lives had just begun to orbit around a shared mystery that would change everything. 3 weeks into her position at Grayson Enterprises, Sophie had settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Her desk, strategically positioned outside Nathaniel's office, gave her a perfect view of Boston's financial district. But more importantly, it allowed her to observe the man who continued to puzzle her. Every morning at exactly 7:45 a.m., Nathaniel arrived with 2 cups of coffee from the cafe downstairs. Without fail, he'd place one on her desk with a quiet, "Good morning, Miss Harper," and disappear into his office. It was a small gesture, but it spoke to a thoughtfulness that contradicted his reputation as a cold corporate titan. "You're lucky," whispered Jessica, the marketing coordinator, during their lunch break. "Mr. Grayson barely acknowledges most of us exist. But with you," she raised an eyebrow suggestively. "It's not like that," Sophie protested, though her cheeks warmed. "He's just being professional." Professional didn't explain the way he sometimes paused mid-sentence when she entered his office, or how his eyes seemed to search her face as if looking for something lost. It certainly didn't explain the electric tension that crackled between them during their daily briefings. That afternoon, while organizing files for the quarterly board meeting, Sophie stumbled upon a folder that had slipped behind Nathaniel's filing cabinet. As she retrieved it, several documents scattered across the floor, including what appeared to be a birth certificate with her name on it. Her hands trembled as she picked up the paper. There it was, Sophie Elena Harper, born March 15, 1999, at Massachusetts General Hospital. Mother, A. Harper. Father, unknown. How did he get this? Sophie. Nathaniel's voice made her jump. He stood in the doorway, his face draining of color as he saw what she held. This fell behind your cabinet." She held up the birth certificate, confusion and hurt warring in her voice. "Why do you have this?" For a moment, Nathaniel looked like a man caught between truth and deception. His jaw worked silently before he stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "I can explain." "Can you?" Sophie's voice rose. "Because right now it looks like you've been investigating me behind my back. Is this some kind of background check? Am I under suspicion for something?" "No, Sophie, it's not." He reached toward her, then stopped, his hand falling to his side. "It's complicated." "Complicated," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know what's complicated. Having your boss secretly investigate your birth records. What's next? My medical files, my school transcripts. Before Nathaniel could respond, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Grayson, there's a Lucas Donovan here to see you. Says he has an appointment about potential investment opportunities. Nathaniel's eyes never left Sophie's face. Send him in. The door opened to reveal a man in his early 30s with the kind of easy charm that made heads turn. Lucas Donovan was everything Nathaniel wasn't. Relaxed where Nathaniel was formal, openly warm where Nathaniel was reserved. His smile could have powered half of Boston. Mr. Grayson. Lucas stepped forward with practiced confidence. Lucas Donovan. Donovan Investments. Thank you for seeing me. His gaze shifted to Sophie, and his smile widened. And you must be Sophie Harper, she managed, still clutching her birth certificate. Sophie. He repeated her name like he was tasting fine wine. Beautiful name for a beautiful woman. Despite her turmoil, Sophie felt herself responding to his warmth. It was such a stark contrast to the tension that always seemed to surround Nathaniel. Miss Harper is my assistant, Nathaniel said stiffly. Perhaps we should discuss your proposal in private. Of course, but Lucas's eyes remained on Sophie. I hope we'll have the chance to talk again soon, Sophie. As the door closed behind them, Sophie sank into her chair, mind reeling. The birth certificate still felt foreign in her hands, like evidence of a crime she didn't know she'd committed 26 years earlier. In a cramped apartment across town, Elena Harper pressed her hand to her growing belly and reread the letter that had arrived that morning. Elena, I've tried to respect your wishes, but I can't stop thinking about you. About us. Please call me. Let me help. In. She crumpled the letter, adding it to the growing pile in her wastebasket. Nathaniel Grayson could offer her the world, but he couldn't offer her the one thing she needed most: freedom from his mother's disapproval. The phone rang, and Elena answered with a heavy heart. Elena, darling. Evelyn Grayson's voice was silk wrapped around steel. I trust you received my attorney's final offer. I don't want your money, Mrs. Grayson. No, but you'll take it anyway, because you love my son enough to save him from the scandal this would cause. A pregnant factory worker claiming to carry a Grayson heir, the media would have a field day. Elena closed her eyes, one hand protectively covering her stomach. And if I refuse, then I'll ensure your family loses their jobs, their home, everything they've worked for. Your choice, dear. The line went dead, leaving Elena alone with her tears and the impossible choice that would haunt 2 generations. Back in the present, Nathaniel found it nearly impossible to concentrate on Lucas Donovan's investment proposal. The young man was articulate and well-prepared, presenting a compelling case for renewable energy partnerships. But all Nathaniel could think about was the hurt in Sophie's eyes. The profit margins are substantial, Lucas was saying, and the environmental impact aligns perfectly with current market trends. Impressive, Nathaniel managed. Your research is thorough. I believe in knowing everything about my investments. Mr. Grayson, companies, people, opportunities. Information is power. Wouldn't you agree? Something in Lucas's tone made Nathaniel look up sharply. The younger man's smile remained pleasant, but there was something calculating in his eyes that hadn't been there when he'd looked at Sophie. Indeed, I'll need time to review your proposal with my board. Of course, I'm planning to be in Boston for several weeks. Perhaps I could take your assistant to dinner. I'd love to hear her perspective on the company culture. Every instinct Nathaniel possessed screamed danger, but he couldn't articulate why. Miss Harper makes her own social decisions. Naturally, she seems like a woman who knows her own mind. After Lucas left, Nathaniel stood at his window, watching the man exit the building. Something about him felt wrong, too polished, too perfect, like an actor playing a role. His phone buzzed with a text from his private investigator. Found something. Need to meet. Tonight, that evening. Sophie sat in her apartment, staring at her birth certificate and trying to make sense of the day's events. The document raised more questions than it answered, particularly the mysterious E. Harper, listed as her mother. Aunt Grace had always called her mother Elena, but official documents usually used full names. A knock at her door interrupted her brooding. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her building's security was notoriously lax. Through the peephole, she saw Lucas Donovan holding a bouquet of white roses. "I hope you don't mind," he said when she opened the door. "I asked around and found your address. I couldn't stop thinking about you." The gesture was romantic in an old-fashioned way that caught her off guard. "That's sweet, but how did you—" "I'm very resourceful when something matters to me." His smile was boyish and charming. "I was hoping you might join me for dinner. I know this little Italian place that makes the best carbonara in the North End." Sophie hesitated. After the day's revelations about Nathaniel's secret investigation, the idea of spending time with someone straightforward and honest was appealing. "I'd like that," she heard herself saying, as she grabbed her jacket. She missed the brief, cold satisfaction that flickered across Lucas's features, an expression that would have reminded her uncomfortably of a hunter who'd just successfully baited his trap. Behind them, Nathaniel's car sat parked across the street, its driver wrestling with whether to follow them or respect Sophie's privacy. In the end, love won over logic, and he started the engine. None of them noticed the nondescript sedan that followed all three, its driver speaking quietly into a phone. Phase 1 complete. The girl has taken the bait. The morning after her dinner with Lucas, Sophie found herself humming as she arranged files on her desk. For the first time in weeks, the knot of tension in her shoulders had loosened. Lucas had been everything she'd hoped for: charming, attentive, and refreshingly uncomplicated. He told her stories about his travels, made her laugh until her sides ached, and walked her to her door like a perfect gentleman. Most importantly, he hadn't subjected her to the confusing emotional whiplash that seemed to define every interaction with Nathaniel Grayson. "You're glowing," Jessica observed, appearing at Sophie's cubicle with coffee and gossip. "Let me guess, tall, dark, and handsome from yesterday." "Lucas Donovan," Sophie confirmed, unable to suppress her smile. "He took me to this amazing little restaurant in the North End." "Donovan. Why does that name sound familiar?" Jessica frowned, then shrugged. "Anyway, details. I need details." Before Sophie could respond, Nathaniel's office door opened with more force than necessary. He emerged looking like he hadn't slept, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. His gray eyes swept over Sophie's happy expression, and something dark flickered across his features. "Miss Harper, I need to see you in my office now." The curt tone made Jessica wince sympathetically and retreat quickly. Sophie followed Nathaniel into his office, noting the way he closed the door with deliberate care, the kind of restraint that suggested he wanted to slam it. "Sit down," he said, moving to stand behind his desk like it was a barrier between them. "Is this about yesterday? Because I think I deserve an explanation about why you have my birth certificate. Did you enjoy your dinner with Mr. Donovan?" The question caught her off guard. Yes, but I don't see how that's any of your business." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Everything that happens to my employees is my business, especially when it involves potential business partners. So now I'm not allowed to have a personal life." "I'm not saying that." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger and more vulnerable. "I'm saying you should be careful. There are things about Lucas Donovan that you don't know, such as—" Nathaniel hesitated, clearly wrestling with how much to reveal. "I've had him investigated. His background doesn't check out completely." Sophie stared at him in disbelief. "You had him investigated, just like you investigated me." "Sophie, no." She stood up, anger flooding through her. "This is insane. You spy on me. You spy on people I have dinner with. What's next? Are you going to bug my apartment? You don't understand. Then help me understand." Her voice cracked with frustration. "Tell me why you have my birth certificate. Tell me why you look at me like you've seen a ghost. Tell me why you care who I have dinner with when you're supposed to be my boss." "Not my father." The word hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to face. Nathaniel went very still, his face draining of color. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my office now." Sophie fled, her heart pounding with confusion and hurt. She didn't see Nathaniel sink into his chair, or the way his hands shook as he reached for the phone. Across town, in a nondescript office building, Victor Donovan studied the photographs spread across his desk. 20 years of planning had led to this moment. His son positioned perfectly to destroy the family that had ruined everything. "She's falling for it," Lucas reported, settling into the chair across from his father. "Sophie Harper is—" Easier than expected. Victor's weathered face cracked into a smile that held no warmth. Good. What about Grayson? Suspicious? But not enough to act on it yet. He's investigating me, but he won't find anything we haven't prepared for. Lucas paused. There's something else. The way he looks at her. It's not professional. Interesting. Victor leaned back, fingers steepled. That could be useful. A man in love makes poor decisions. About that, Lucas shifted uncomfortably. She's not what I expected, Sophie. I mean, she's genuine, kind. Maybe we should reconsider involving her so deeply in this. Victor's expression hardened. Are you developing feelings for the target, son? No, Lucas said quickly. Too quickly. I'm just saying she's innocent in all this. So was your mother when they destroyed her reputation along with mine. So were you when you had to watch your father become a laughingstock. Victor's voice turned cold. Innocence is a luxury we can't afford. You have your orders. Lucas nodded, but as he left his father's office, doubt gnawed at his conscience. Sophie's smile had been so genuine, her laugh so infectious. For a moment at dinner, he'd forgotten why he was there. But then he remembered the nights he'd heard his father crying, the way his mother had withered away from shame and stress, and his resolve hardened. The Graysons deserved what was coming to them. All of them. At Grayson Enterprises, Sophie tried to focus on her work, but the confrontation with Nathaniel had left her shaken. Every time his office door opened, she tensed, expecting another uncomfortable encounter. Around lunchtime, a delivery arrived. A dozen white roses with a simple card. Thank you for a perfect evening. Looking forward to many more. L. Someone smitten, Jessica observed, admiring the flowers. Sophie smiled despite her mood. At least Lucas was straightforward about his intentions. No mysterious investigations or cryptic warnings, just honest interest in getting to know her better. Her phone buzzed with a text. Free for lunch. I know a great place with outdoor seating. Lucas. She glanced toward Nathaniel's closed office door, then typed back, I'd love to. 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from Lucas at a charming cafe overlooking the harbor. He'd somehow managed to secure the best table despite the lunch rush, and he ordered for both of them with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. You seem upset, he observed, reaching across the table to touch her hand. Everything okay at work? Sophie hesitated. Just boss troubles. Nothing I can't handle. Grayson giving you a hard time. Lucas's voice carried just the right note of protective concern. I got the impression yesterday that he's quite protective of you. Protective? Sophie laughed bitterly. More like controlling. He seems to think he has the right to approve my personal relationships. That's completely inappropriate. Lucas's grip on her hand tightened slightly. You're a grown woman. You have every right to see whoever you want. Exactly. Sophie felt vindicated by his support. I just don't understand why he cares so much. Lucas was quiet for a moment, seemingly lost in thought. Maybe he sees something in you that reminds him of someone else. Powerful men like Grayson often get, attached to people who remind them of their past. There was something in his tone that made Sophie look at him more closely. You sound like you know him personally. Just business research, Lucas said smoothly. I always study the companies I'm considering investing in. Nathaniel Grayson has quite a reputation. Brilliant businessman, but known for his obsessive tendencies. Obsessive. The way he threw himself into work after his great love died. Elena something or other. Tragic story. Really. She was supposedly the love of his life, but she died in a car accident before they could be together. Sophie's blood ran cold. Elena. You know the story. My mother's name was Elena. She died in a car accident when I was 3. Lucas went very still, his fork halfway to his mouth. That's quite a coincidence. But even as he said it, pieces began clicking into place in Sophie's mind. Nathaniel's reaction to her name, the way he looked at her, the photograph on his desk, his investigation into her background. Oh my God, she whispered. Sophie, what is it? I need to go. She stood abruptly, her mind reeling. I need to talk to my aunt. Lucas watched her hurry away, a slow smile spreading across his face. Phase 2 was beginning even sooner than he'd anticipated. Back at his table, he pulled out his phone and dialed. It's me, he said. When Victor answered, She's starting to figure it out. We need to accelerate the timeline. Good. Victor's voice was cold with satisfaction. Let her discover the truth about her precious mother and Saint Nathaniel. By the time she learns what really happened, she'll be ready to watch their world burn. As Lucas hung up, he almost felt sorry for Sophie. She had no idea that every revelation she was about to uncover had been carefully orchestrated to lead her down a path of destruction. Almost? Nathaniel's hands trembled as he opened the sealed envelope from the private laboratory. He'd known this moment would come since the day he'd collected Sophie's coffee cup from the break room, but knowing hadn't prepared him for the reality of seeing it in black and white. DNA paternity test results. 999% probability that Nathaniel Grayson is the biological father of Sophie Elena Harper. The words blurred as tears he hadn't shed in decades threatened to surface. 26 years. 26 years of believing Elena had left him for another man. 26 years of carrying guilt and rage and heartbreak, when all along his daughter, their daughter, had been growing up in poverty just miles away. He set the report aside with shaking hands and reached for the locked drawer in his desk. Inside lay the discovery that had shattered his world just days earlier. His mother's private files, found in the safe deposit box after her funeral last year, but only recently examined by his attorney. The first document was a hospital record from Massachusetts General, dated March 1999. Elena Harper had been admitted for complications during pregnancy, alone. With no emergency contact listed, the attending physician's notes mentioned her distress about family pressure and impossible choices. The second was a canceled check for $50,000, made out to Elena Harper and signed by Evelyn Grayson. The memo line read, "Final payment, as agreed." But it was the third document that had destroyed him completely. A letter in his mother's handwriting, never sent, detailing her plan to remove the Harper problem permanently and ensure that woman and her bastard child never darken our family's reputation. Evelyn had orchestrated everything. The mysterious phone calls that made Elena stop taking his calls, the rumors about Elena being seen with other men, the convenient job offer that took Elena across the country just as Nathaniel had been planning to propose. Even Elena's death, Nathaniel now suspected, hadn't been the accident everyone believed. A knock on his door interrupted his spiral into guilt and rage. "Come in, Mr. Grayson." Sophie appeared in the doorway, and for a moment, seeing her there with Elena's eyes and Elena's gentle smile, Nathaniel couldn't breathe. "I need to ask you something." "Of course." He quickly closed the file folder, but not before Sophie caught a glimpse of her mother's name on one of the documents. "Why do you have files about my mother?" The direct question hung between them like a loaded gun. Nathaniel looked at this remarkable young woman, his daughter, and felt the weight of 26 years of lies crushing down on him. "Sophie, please sit down." "I'll stand, thank you." Her voice was steady, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "At lunch today, Lucas mentioned that you lost someone named Elena. My mother was Elena Harper, so I'll ask again. Why do you have files about her?" Nathaniel closed his eyes. There was no good way to do this. No gentle path through the minefield they'd stumbled into. "Because Elena Harper was the love of my life," he said quietly. "And because I know, that you're my daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophie's face went through a rapid succession of emotions. Shock, disbelief, anger, and something that might have been recognition. "That's impossible. The DNA results came back today, Sophie. I'm your father." She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "You're lying. My mother told Aunt Grace that my father was a married man who could never acknowledge me. She said he was powerful and—" Sophie stopped, the pieces clicking into place. "Oh God. I never knew," Nathaniel said desperately, rising from his chair. "Sophie, I swear to you, I never knew Elena was pregnant. She disappeared from my life without explanation. I thought she'd left me for someone else, but she didn't. No, my mother." He gestured helplessly at the files. "My mother paid her to disappear, threatened her family, bribed doctors, destroyed every letter Elena tried to send me. I only discovered the truth after Mother died." Sophie sank into the chair she'd refused earlier, her face pale. "All these years, Aunt Grace knew. She knew and never told me. I think Grace was protecting you, and maybe protecting Elena's memory." "From what?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. From the truth about what my family did to her, Sophie. My mother drove Elena away with threats and money. When that wasn't enough, she made sure Elena could never come back. What do you mean? The car accident that killed your mother wasn't an accident. The brake lines had been cut. The words hung in the air like poison. Sophie stared at him, her face cycling through disbelief, horror, and rage. You're saying your mother had my mother murdered? I can't prove it, but yes. I believe that's exactly what happened. Sophie stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. Get away from me. Sophie, get away from me. Her voice cracked like a whip. You think you can just waltz into my life and tell me that your family murdered my mother and that you're my father after 26 years of nothing? I didn't know. I don't care. Tears streamed down her face. I don't care what you knew or didn't know. Your mother killed mine. And you want me to what? Play happy family? Call you daddy? She was backing toward the door, and Nathaniel could see her slipping away from him just like Elena had. Please, Sophie. Don't go. We can work through this together. There is no together, she spat. There's you, with your guilt and your money and your convenient explanations, and there's me, the bastard daughter you never wanted to find. That's not true, isn't it? You've had the resources to find me for years if you'd really wanted to. But you didn't look for Elena or her child until I landed in your office by accident. The accusation hit home because there was truth in it. Nathaniel had convinced himself that Elena had made her choice, and he'd respected it by not pursuing her. His pride had cost him 26 years with his daughter. You're right, he said quietly. I should have looked harder. I should have fought for her, for both of you. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right. Right. Sophie laughed bitterly. You want to make things right? You can start by staying out of my life. She turned to leave, but Nathaniel's voice stopped her. Lucas Donovan isn't who you think he is. Sophie spun around, fury blazing in her eyes. Don't you dare. Don't you dare try to poison the one good thing in my life right now. His father is Victor Donovan. 20 years ago, my mother had Victor fired and blacklisted from the industry on charges of embezzlement, charges that may have been fabricated. So Victor Donovan has every reason to want revenge against my family, and now his son is courting my daughter. Sophie's hand was on the door handle, but she hesitated. You're paranoid. Maybe, but promise me you'll be careful. I don't owe you any promises, Sophie said, but some of the fire had gone out of her voice. I need to think. I need to talk to Aunt Grace. Sophie, Nathaniel's voice was broken. I know this changes everything. But please remember, I loved your mother more than life itself, and I already love you more than you'll ever know. Sophie's hand stilled on the door handle. For a moment, her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Then she straightened, opened the door, and walked out of his life. Nathaniel sank back into his chair. The DNA results still spread across his desk. He'd found his daughter only to lose her in the same breath, and somewhere in the city, he was certain Lucas Donovan was waiting to catch her when she fell. The sins of his mother were still destroying the people he loved, and Nathaniel wasn't sure how to stop the cycle of damage before it claimed another generation. Outside his office, Sophie sat in her car in the parking garage, sobbing as she called Lucas. I need to see you, she choked out when he answered. Can you come over tonight? Of course, darling. What's wrong? Everything, she whispered. Everything is wrong. As she hung up, Sophie didn't notice the black sedan that had been following her for weeks, or the telephoto lens capturing her tears through the windshield. The game was accelerating, and she was still unaware she was a pawn in someone else's strategy for revenge. Sophie paced her tiny apartment like a caged animal, her mind reeling from Nathaniel's revelations. Every few minutes, she'd stop in front of her mother's photograph, searching Elena's face for answers that would never come. Nathaniel Grayson is my father. The words felt foreign. Impossible. She'd spent 26 years imagining her father as a faceless figure, sometimes a villain who'd abandoned her mother, sometimes a tragic hero prevented by circumstances from claiming his family. Never once had she imagined he was the man whose coffee she'd been bringing for weeks, whose presence made her feel like she was coming home to a place she'd never been. A knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Lucas stood in the hallway holding takeout bags and wearing an expression of genuine concern that immediately made her feel less alone. "Thai food," he announced, stepping inside and setting the bags on her small kitchen counter. "And wine, lots of wine." Despite everything, Sophie managed a weak smile. "You're going to think I'm crazy. Try me." Lucas pulled her into his arms, and for a moment, Sophie let herself sink into his warmth and stability. After the emotional earthquake of the afternoon, his presence felt like solid ground. Over dinner, she told him everything, carefully omitting Nathaniel's warnings about Lucas himself. She watched his face as she revealed the DNA results, the files about her mother, the horrific possibility that Evelyn Grayson had orchestrated Elena's death. "Jesus, Sophie." Lucas set down his wine glass, looking stunned. That's incredible. And horrible. I can't imagine how you must be feeling." "I don't know what I'm feeling," Sophie admitted. "Angry, confused, betrayed, 26 years. Lucas, 26 years I've wondered about my father, and he was right there in Boston the whole time. But he didn't know," Lucas pointed out gently. "From what you've told me, he was as much a victim of his mother's manipulations as you and Elena were." Sophie looked at him sharply. "You're defending him. I'm trying to help you see this clearly." Lucas reached across the table to take her hand. "I know you're hurt. You have every right to be. But Nathaniel Grayson just had his world turned upside down too. He thought the woman he loved had abandoned him. And now he's discovered not only that she didn't, but that she died because of his family's actions, and that he has a daughter he never knew existed. Whose side are you on?" Sophie pulled her hand away, suddenly feeling defensive. "Yours. Always yours." Lucas's voice was soft but firm. "But I also know what it's like to grow up without a father, and if I suddenly discovered he was alive and wanted a relationship with me, I think I'd want to at least try." Something in his tone made Sophie study his face more carefully. "You said you know what it's like to grow up without a father." "My dad died when I was 8, Lucas said quietly. "Lost his job, fell into depression, started drinking. One night he wrapped his car around a tree rather than face another day of failure. Oh, Lucas, I'm so sorry. The point is, I would have given anything for a second chance with him, even if it was complicated, even if there was baggage involved." He paused. "Don't let pride cost you the opportunity to know your father, Sophie. You might regret it for the rest of your life." His words hit home in a way that surprised her. She'd been so focused on her anger and hurt that she hadn't considered Nathaniel's perspective or her own potential regrets. "But what if he's lying?" she whispered. "What if this is all some elaborate manipulation? Why would he lie about something so easily disproven? DNA tests don't lie, Sophie. And from what I observed in his office, the man clearly cares about you." Sophie was quiet for a long moment, processing. "He warned me about you. You know." Lucas went very still. "What did he say?" "That your background doesn't check out completely. That your father was fired from some company 20 years ago and might want revenge." Sophie watched his face carefully. "He thinks you're using me to get back at him." For a split second, something flickered across Lucas's features. Too quick for Sophie to identify, but enough to make her breath catch. Then his expression settled into hurt confusion. That's partially true," he admitted. "My father did work for a company connected to Grayson Enterprises. He was accused of embezzlement and fired without cause. It destroyed him." Sophie's blood ran cold. "Lucas, but I'm not using you for revenge, Sophie. Yes, I knew who you were when I first approached you. Yes, I was curious about the connection between your boss and the company that destroyed my family, but whatever this started as, it's become something real." "You knew who I was." Sophie stood up abruptly, anger flaring. "You've been lying to me this whole time." "I've been protecting you," Lucas said, rising to face her. "Do you think it's a coincidence that you ended up working for Grayson Enterprises, that you got a position in the National Opportunity Grant program that puts you directly in Nathaniel's path? What are you talking about?" "The program was created by Evelyn Grayson 20 years ago as a PR move after the scandal with my father. It was designed to help disadvantaged youth get opportunities in corporate America, Sophie. You were selected specifically because of your background, because of your mother's name." The room seemed to tilt around her. "That's impossible." "Is it? Think about it. A young woman named Harper, whose mother was Elena, whose background screams perfect redemption story for a company trying to rehabilitate its image. You weren't chosen randomly, Sophie. You were chosen because someone wanted you in that building. But who? And why? Lucas was quiet for a moment, seeming to wrestle with himself. I think someone else knows the truth about your parentage. Someone who wanted you to meet Nathaniel. That's insane. Is it more insane than learning your boss is your father? Or that his mother had your mother killed? Lucas moved closer, his voice gentle but urgent. Sophie, I think we're both pawns in someone else's game. Sophie sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. I can't deal with this right now. I need time to think. Of course. Lucas knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. But whatever you decide about Nathaniel, don't let his paranoia poison what we have. I care about you, Sophie, more than I've ever cared about anyone. His words were exactly what she needed to hear, and when he kissed her, Sophie let herself get lost in the simplicity of physical comfort. But even as she responded to his touch, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that nothing in her life was simple anymore. Later, after Lucas had gone home, Sophie sat in her darkened living room staring at her phone. Nathaniel had called 3 times and sent 2 text messages, all of which she'd ignored, but his words kept echoing in her mind. Lucas Donovan isn't who you think he is. Maybe not. But was Nathaniel who he claimed to be either? Could she trust the man who'd had her investigated? Who'd kept her birth certificate without permission? Who came from a family capable of murder? Around midnight, she made a decision that would change everything. She picked up her phone and sent a text to Lucas. I want to marry you soon. I need something real in my life right now. His response came within minutes. Are you sure? We haven't known each other very long. I've never been more sure of anything. I love you, Lucas. I love you too, yes, Sophie. Yes to everything. As Sophie finally drifted off to sleep, she missed the follow-up text that arrived an hour later. Phase 3 initiated. Wedding scheduled for next month. The girl is ready to burn all bridges. L. Across town. Victor Donovan smiled as he read his son's message. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Soon, Nathaniel Grayson would lose the only thing that mattered more than his company, his newfound daughter's love and trust. And when Sophie Harper Donovan learned the full truth about her husband's identity and motivations, she would be perfectly positioned to help Victor destroy the Grayson empire from within. The old man raised his glass of whiskey in a toast to his own brilliance. Revenge, he'd learned, was indeed a dish best served cold. The call came at 3:47 a.m., jarring Sophie from restless sleep. She fumbled for her phone, still groggy from the wine and emotional exhaustion of the previous evening. Sophie. Grace's voice was weak, barely recognizable. Honey, I'm in the hospital. Sophie shot upright, instantly alert. Aunt Grace, what happened? Which hospital? Massachusetts General. I collapsed at home. Mrs. Rodriguez found me and called 911. Grace's breathing sounded labored. Sophie, I need to tell you something. About your mother. About everything. I'm on my way. Sophie was already pulling on clothes with one hand. Don't talk. Just rest. I'll be there in 20 minutes. No, listen to me. Grace's voice carried new urgency. There are things I should have told you years ago about Elena and Nathaniel, about why she really left. The line crackled with static, then went dead. Sophie tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. Her hands shook as she grabbed her keys and rushed out into the pre-dawn darkness. At Massachusetts General Hospital, Grace Harper lay in the IQ connected to machines that beeped and hummed with mechanical persistence. The doctor, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, met Sophie in the hallway with an expression that telegraphed bad news. Miss Harper, I'm Dr. Martinez. Your aunt has suffered a massive stroke, I'm afraid. The damage is extensive. Sophie's legs nearly gave out. Is she going to be okay? We're making her as comfortable as possible, but I need you to understand. She may not have much time. Hours, perhaps a day or 2 at most. The world tilted around Sophie. First the bombshell about Nathaniel. Now this. Grace was the only family she'd ever known. The woman who'd raised her with fierce love and unwavering support. Can I see her? Of course. But Miss Harper, she's been asking for someone named Nathaniel. She seems quite agitated about speaking with him. Sophie's blood ran cold. Did she say why? Something about letters. She keeps saying the letters over and over. Meanwhile, across the city, Nathaniel sat in his home office staring at the stack of documents that had turned his world upside down. He hadn't slept since Sophie walked out of his office, hadn't eaten, had barely managed to function through the motions of running his company. His phone rang, an unknown number. "Mr. Grayson, this is Dr. Martinez at Mass General. I have a patient here, Grace Harper, who's been asking for you. Are you familiar with this woman?" Nathaniel's heart stopped. Grace Harper, Sophie's aunt, the woman who'd raised Elena's daughter. "I'll be right there. Sir, Miss Harper she's critically ill. If you have something to say to her, I'd suggest you come quickly." Sophie sat beside Grace's bed, holding her aunt's frail hand and fighting back tears. Grace drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost in memories from decades past. "Elena," Grace whispered, her eyes unfocused. "Elena, you have to tell him. He deserves to know about the baby. Aunt Grace, it's me. It's Sophie." Grace's eyes sharpened suddenly, focusing on her niece's face with startling clarity. "Sophie, thank God. Listen to me carefully. There's a box in my closet, behind the winter coats. Letters your mother wrote but never sent. Letters. To Nathaniel, dozens of them. She wrote to him every week for years. But Evelyn Grayson, that woman intercepted everything. Elena never stopped loving him. Sophie never stopped hoping he'd find her." Sophie's throat tightened. "Aunt Grace. The last letter. She wrote it the night before the accident. She'd finally decided to tell him about you. Consequences be damned. She was going to drive to his office the next morning, but she never made it." "No." Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "But you're here now. You found each other anyway. It's too late, Aunt Grace. I've ruined everything. I'm marrying Lucas next month." Grace's grip on Sophie's hand suddenly tightened with surprising strength. "No, Sophie, you can't, that boy. There's something wrong about him. You don't know him. I know his face." Grace struggled to sit up slightly. "I saw him weeks ago, watching your apartment building, then again outside the grocery store where you shop. He was following you long before you met him at Grayson Enterprises." The words hit Sophie like ice water. "That's impossible. Sophie, I may be dying, but my mind is clear. That young man has been stalking you. Whatever he's told you, whatever his reasons for approaching you, it wasn't coincidence." Before Sophie could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. She turned to see Nathaniel standing in the doorway, looking haggard and uncertain. "Grace asked for me," he said quietly. "But if you'd prefer I leave." "Nathaniel." Grace's voice was stronger suddenly. "Come in. Both of you need to hear this." Sophie wanted to protest, but something in her aunt's tone stopped her. Nathaniel approached the bed cautiously, his eyes moving between Grace and Sophie. "Grace, I'm so sorry," he began. "If I'd known you were Elena's sister, you would have found us years ago." Grace finished. "I know. I kept Sophie hidden from you deliberately." "Why?" Grace looked at Sophie, then back at Nathaniel. "Because I was terrified of what your family might do to her. Elena made me promise. If anything happened to her, I was to keep Sophie away from the Graysons at all costs." "She knew," Nathaniel said, understanding flooding his features. "Elena knew my mother was dangerous. More than dangerous. Elena suspected Evelyn was having her followed. Her phone tapped, the night before the accident. Elena called me. She was scared, but determined. She said she couldn't live with the lie anymore, that you deserved to know about Sophie." Grace reached into the bedside table drawer with shaking hands and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age. "She asked me to give you this if anything happened to her. I've carried it for 26 years, waiting for the right moment." Nathaniel took the envelope with trembling hands. His name was written across the front in Elena's familiar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and as he read it, tears began streaming down his face. "What does it say?" Sophie asked softly. Nathaniel's voice broke as he read aloud. "My dearest Nathaniel, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and Grace has finally found the courage to give you this letter. I need you to know that I never stopped loving you, not for a single day. Our daughter, yes, our daughter, is the most beautiful, brilliant child you could imagine. She has your eyes and your stubborn determination. But I pray she has more courage than I've shown. I was a coward, my love, when your mother threatened my family. I ran instead of fighting. I chose the easier path, and it cost us everything. But Sophie is our miracle. She's proof that love can survive even the cruelest circumstances. Take care of her, Nathaniel. Love her enough for both of us. And if you can find it in your heart, forgive me for keeping her from you. All my love, always and forever. Elena P. Bees. I've hidden copies of all the letters I wrote you, the ones your mother intercepted, in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box 847. The key is taped under Sophie's jewelry box. Someday, when she's old enough, show her how much her father was loved. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of Grace's monitors. Sophie stared at Nathaniel, seeing him not as her boss, or even as the stranger claiming to be her father, but as a man who'd lost everything and was only now discovering what had been stolen from him. There's more, Grace whispered. Sophie, your engagement to Lucas Donovan. It's a trap. His real name is Lucas Donovan Cross. His father is Victor Cross, the man Evelyn Grayson destroyed 20 years ago. Sophie's world tilted again. What? Victor Cross was innocent of the embezzlement charges. Evelyn framed him to cover up her own theft from the company pension fund. When Victor tried to expose her, she had him arrested and blacklisted. His wife died from the stress, and his son has been planning revenge ever since. No, Sophie whispered. Lucas loves me. He wouldn't. Check his phone, Grace urged. Check his real name, Sophie. He's been using you from the beginning. Nathaniel was already on his phone, calling his security team. I need everything you can find on Lucas Donovan, also known as Lucas Cross, Father Victor Cross. I need it now. As Grace's words sank in, Sophie felt the last stable foundation in her life crumble. Lucas, charming, supportive Lucas who'd been her refuge from the chaos, had been manipulating her from their first meeting. The wedding, she whispered in horror. It's next month. I told him I wanted to marry him quickly. That's what he's been waiting for, Grace said weakly. Once you're married, he'll have legal access to everything connected to your family, including any claim you might have to Grayson Enterprises. Sophie's phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Can't wait to marry you, darling. 1 month and you'll be mine forever. The words that had seemed romantic hours earlier now felt like a threat. Sophie's apartment felt like a crime scene. As she searched through Lucas's belongings with the methodical precision of someone whose world had just imploded, he'd been staying over more frequently in the week since their engagement, leaving behind traces of a life that now seemed entirely fabricated. In his laptop bag, she found business cards for Lucas Cross, private investigations. In his jacket pocket, a hotel key card for the Marriott. Strange, since he'd told her he was renting a furnished apartment in Back Bay. Most damning of all, tucked behind his driver's license, was a small photograph of her taken outside Grayson Enterprises weeks before they'd supposedly met. Her hands shook as she dialed Nathaniel's number. He answered on the first ring. Sophie, thank God. Are you safe? I found proof, she said, her voice hollow. Photos, business cards, everything. Grace was right. Lucas has been watching me for weeks, maybe months. Where are you now? My apartment. But Nathaniel, there's something else. I found a list in his handwriting. It's a timeline. Our first meeting. When I told you about the birth certificate, when Grace got sick, he's been documenting everything. Get out of there now. I can't just disappear. The wedding is tomorrow. Sophie, listen to me. My security team uncovered Victor Cross's real plan. The wedding isn't the end game. It's just the beginning. Once you're legally married to Lucas, they plan to use you to challenge my will, claim you're entitled to half of Grayson Enterprises as my daughter, and then destroy the company from within. Sophie sank onto her couch, overwhelmed. This is insane. How could I have been so stupid? You fell in love with someone who was very good at lying. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. But I should have seen the signs. Sophie, Nathaniel's voice was gentle but firm. Right now, we need to focus on keeping you safe. Pack a bag and meet me at... The sound of a key in her front door lock cut him off. Sophie's blood turned to ice. He's here, she whispered into the phone. Lucas is here. Hide the phone but keep the line open, Nathaniel instructed urgently. I'm on my way. Sophie quickly shoved the phone under a couch cushion, just as Lucas walked through the door, carrying wedding magazines and a bottle of champagne. Surprise, he beamed at her, seeming genuinely happy. I thought we could finalize some last-minute details for tomorrow. For a moment, looking at his familiar smile and the excited gleam in his eyes, Sophie almost convinced herself that Grace and Nathaniel were wrong. This was Lucas, her Lucas, who brought her flowers and made her laugh and held her when she cried. Then she noticed the way his gaze swept the room, cataloging what she'd been doing, and the illusion shattered. You've been busy, he observed, noting the open drawers and scattered papers. Spring cleaning, something like that. Sophie tried to keep her voice steady. Actually, I've been thinking about tomorrow, having second thoughts. There was something sharp in his tone now, an edge that hadn't been there before. No, not second thoughts, just nervous, I guess. It's all happening so fast. Lucas set down the champagne and moved closer, and Sophie fought the urge to step back. Cold feet are normal, darling. But once we're married, everything will be perfect, you'll see. Will it? The question slipped out before she could stop it. What do you mean? Sophie's mind raced. She needed to keep him talking, needed to buy time for Nathaniel to arrive. I mean, what happens after tomorrow? We've never really talked about the future, where we'll live, what we want. We'll figure it out as we go. Lucas reached for her, but Sophie pretended to need something from the kitchen, putting the island between them. And your investment in Grayson Enterprises? How does that work with us being married? Something flickered across Lucas's features. So quickly she almost missed it. Why do you ask? Well, if Nathaniel really is my father, wouldn't that create some kind of conflict of interest? Lucas was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. You've been talking to him again. It wasn't a question. Sophie's heart hammered against her ribs. He's my boss, Lucas. Of course I talk to him. That's not what I mean. And you know it. Lucas's voice had gone cold. What did he tell you about me? Nothing. Why would he tell me anything about you? Because Nathaniel Grayson is a paranoid, controlling man who sees threats everywhere, because he can't stand the thought of losing his newfound daughter to someone he can't manipulate. Is that what you think this is? Manipulation, isn't it? Lucas moved around the island, closing the distance between them. He had you investigated before you even knew who he was. He's been pulling strings in your life for weeks, and now he's trying to poison you against the one person who really loves you. The one person who really loves me? Sophie repeated slowly. Is that what you are, Lucas? Of course I am, but there was something desperate in his voice now. Sophie, I know this is confusing. I know there are things about my past I haven't told you, like your real name. The words hung between them like a loaded gun. Lucas went very still, his mask finally slipping completely. So he did tell you. Grace told me before you arranged for her to have that stroke. I didn't arrange anything, Lucas snapped. Your aunt is old and sick. These things happen. Do they? Just like car accidents happen to women who threaten powerful families. Lucas's face darkened. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I, Lucas Cross? Son of Victor Cross. Ring any bells? For a moment, they stared at each other across the kitchen island. Predator and prey. Hunter and hunted. Then Lucas's expression shifted, becoming almost sad. I didn't want it to happen this way, he said quietly. I really didn't. What way? I was supposed to make you fall in love with me, marry you, and use you to destroy Nathaniel Grayson. Simple revenge for what his family did to mine. Lucas ran a hand through his hair. But then I actually got to know you, and what? And I fell in love with you for real. His voice cracked. Sophie, everything I told you about my feelings, that was real. The rest of it, the revenge plot, my father's plan, I don't care about any of that anymore. I just want to be with you. Sophie stared at him, seeing the boy he must have been. Lost, angry, consumed by his father's bitterness. Despite everything, she felt a pang of sympathy. Lucas, if that's true, then help me. Tell me what your father is really planning. I can't. His voice was anguished. You don't understand. He's all I have left if I betray him now. Then you're choosing him over me. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Sophie's voice rose. You lied to me from the beginning. You made me fall in love with someone who doesn't even exist. I exist, Lucas said desperately. The man who held you when you cried about your mother, who listened to your dreams, who wanted to build a life with you. That's all real. Is it? Or is it just another part of the con? Before Lucas could answer, Sophie's phone rang from its hiding place under the couch cushion. They both heard Nathaniel's voice. Sophie, are you there? I'm in the parking garage. Lucas's expression hardened. You called him. Lucas, please. You chose him over me. There was something broken in his voice. After everything I told you, everything we shared, you still chose the man who never even knew you existed until a few weeks ago. I chose the truth over lies. The truth. Lucas laughed bitterly. You want the truth, fine. Tomorrow's wedding is happening. Whether you want it or not, my father has too much invested in this plan to let you walk away now. What are you saying? I'm saying that I tried to do this the easy way, with love and romance and happily ever after. But there are other ways to get a woman to the altar. Sophie's blood ran cold. Lucas, you're scaring me. Good, he said, pulling out his phone. Because you should be scared. As he dialed, Sophie made a desperate decision. She grabbed the champagne bottle from the counter and swung it at Lucas's head. He ducked, but the distraction gave her enough time to run for the door. She burst into the hallway just as the elevator doors opened and Nathaniel stepped out. Behind her, she could hear Lucas shouting into his phone. She knows. Yes, everything. We need to move to phase 4 immediately. Sophie. Nathaniel caught her as she stumbled toward him. What happened? We have to stop the wedding, she gasped. Whatever it takes, we have to stop it. But even as Nathaniel pulled her into the elevator, Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The game had been in motion for 20 years, and tomorrow, all the pieces would finally fall into place. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of Holy Trinity Church, painting rainbow patterns across the white satin aisle runner. Wedding guests filled the pews, mostly strangers to Sophie. She realized with growing unease, Lucas had insisted on handling the guest list, claiming he wanted to surprise her with family friends she'd never met. Now she understood why. These weren't wedding guests. They were witnesses to Victor Cross's ultimate revenge. Sophie stood in the church's small bridal room, staring at herself in the antique mirror. The wedding dress, a family heirloom that Lucas claimed belonged to his grandmother, felt like a costume for a role she no longer wanted to play. Her hands shook as she tried to fasten the pearl necklace Grace had given her years ago. You don't have to do this. Sophie turned to see Nathaniel standing in the doorway, looking haggard but determined. He'd spent the night trying to convince her to run, to disappear until they could figure out how to stop Victor's plan permanently. But Sophie had refused. Yes, I do, she said quietly. If I run now, they'll just find another way. Grace is dying, Nathaniel. I won't spend her last days in hiding. There has to be another way. There is. Sophie turned back to the mirror, her reflection showing a resolve that surprised even her. We let them play their hand, and then we destroy them with the truth. Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice urgent. Sophie, you don't understand what you're risking. Once you're legally married to Lucas, even if we expose the fraud later, the damage to the company will be survivable. But if we let Victor Cross destroy other innocent people to get to us, I'll never forgive myself. Sophie met his eyes in the mirror. Besides, you'll be there if things go wrong. I'll be there, Nathaniel promised. But Sophie, I need you to know, whatever happens today, I'm proud to be your father. For the first time in days, Sophie smiled genuinely. I'm proud to be your daughter. A knock at the door interrupted them. Miss Harper, a young woman peeked in, someone Sophie didn't recognize. It's time. The wedding march began, and Sophie walked down the aisle alone, having refused Lucas's suggestion that Nathaniel give her away. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was walking toward a man who'd betrayed her, past a father she'd only just found. Lucas waited at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking every inch the devoted groom. But Sophie could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept scanning the crowd. He was as nervous as she was, though for different reasons. Father Mackenzie, the elderly priest who'd baptized Sophie as a baby, smiled warmly as she approached. At least he was real, she thought, At least someone in this charade actually cared about her well-being. "Dearly beloved," Father Mackenzie began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Sophie Elena Harper and Lucas Michael Donovan." Even his last name was a lie. Sophie's hands clenched around her bouquet as the priest continued with the familiar words that had been spoken in this church for over a century. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted by God, in the third pew. Victor Cross sat with the satisfied expression of a man watching his life's work come to fruition. He'd aged well for his 70 years, still distinguished despite the hardships Evelyn Grayson had put him through. Sophie almost felt sorry for him. Almost. If any person can show just cause why this couple may not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The church fell silent. Sophie's heart hammered as she waited, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would stand up and stop this madness. The silence stretched on. Father Mackenzie opened his mouth to continue with the ceremony. That's when the massive oak doors at the back of the church burst open with a sound like thunder. Nathaniel Grayson strode down the aisle, his face set with grim determination. In his hands, he carried a thick manila envelope that seemed to glow with promise in the colored light from the stained glass windows. "I can show just cause," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "I have evidence that this marriage is based on fraud, deception, and conspiracy." The wedding guests erupted in murmurs. Lucas went pale, while Victor Cross rose from his seat, his face twisted with rage. "You have no right," Victor began. "I have every right," Nathaniel cut him off. "I am Sophie's father, and I will not stand by while you use her to settle a 20-year-old grudge." Father Mackenzie looked bewildered. "Mr. Grayson, I'm not sure what." "Father, please." Nathaniel approached the altar, his eyes never leaving Sophie's face. "Before this young woman makes the biggest mistake of her life, she needs to know the truth about the man she's about to marry." "Stop him!" Victor hissed to his son. "Stop him now!" But Lucas seemed frozen, staring at Nathaniel with a mixture of fear and something that might have been relief. Nathaniel opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "Sophie, these are copies of the letters your mother wrote to me. Letters that were intercepted by my mother for 26 years. Letters that prove Elena never stopped loving me, never chose to leave me." He handed her the stack, and Sophie's hands trembled as she recognized her mother's handwriting. The first letter was dated just weeks after Elena had disappeared from Nathaniel's life. "My dearest Nathaniel," Sophie read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I have to try. Your mother came to see me today. She knows about the baby." The church was dead silent now. Sophie continued reading, her voice growing stronger with each word. "She threatened my family, threatened to destroy everyone I love if I don't disappear from your life completely. I want to fight her, but I'm so scared. Not for me, but for our child. What kind of mother would I be if I brought a baby into a war I can't win?" Sophie looked up at Nathaniel, tears streaming down her face. "She was protecting me. There's more," Nathaniel said gently. "The last letter." Read the last letter. Sophie flipped to the final page, dated just days before Elena's death. "I can't live with this lie anymore. Our daughter deserves to know her father, and you deserve to know you have a child. I'm going to tell you everything. Consequences be damned if something happens to me. If Evelyn carries out her threats, I need you to know that I loved you until my last breath. Take care of our Sophie. Tell her that her mother died fighting for love, not running from it." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophie stared at the letter, finally understanding the full scope of what had been stolen from her family. "Lucas," she said, turning to face her groom, "did you know about these letters?" Lucas's mask finally slipped completely. "Sophie, did you know?" "Yes." The word came out as a broken whisper. "My father, he's had copies for years. They were part of his evidence that Evelyn Grayson was a monster. And you used them to manipulate me. At first, yes, but Sophie, I swear to you, my feelings became real." "Enough." Victor Cross strode toward the altar, his composure finally cracking. "You want the truth? Fine. Yes. This was all planned. Yes. We manipulated you into falling in love with my son. But we did it to expose the corruption of the Grayson family. He turned to address the shocked congregation. Evelyn Grayson murdered Elena Harper because she threatened the family's precious reputation. She framed me for embezzlement to cover her own crimes. She destroyed innocent lives to protect her son's political ambitions. That may be true, Nathaniel said quietly. But that doesn't give you the right to destroy Sophie's life for revenge, doesn't it? Victor's eyes blazed with 20 years of suppressed rage. She's a Grayson now. Whether she likes it or not, she carries the blood of murderers and thieves. She carries the blood of a woman who died for love, Nathaniel corrected. And she deserves better than to be a pawn in your game. Sophie looked between the three men who had shaped her destiny without her knowledge or consent. Her father, who'd lost everything but was trying to protect her now. Lucas, who'd loved her despite his lies. And Victor, consumed by a justified anger that had curdled into something poisonous. Finally, she spoke. The wedding is off. Lucas stepped toward her, desperation in his eyes. Sophie, please. I know I lied, but what I feel for you is real. We can start over. Away from all this. No. Sophie's voice was firm. I won't marry someone who sees me as a means to an end, no matter how you justify it. That's when Lucas pulled the gun. The gun appeared in Lucas's hand so suddenly that for a moment, the wedding guests sat in stunned silence, as if this too were part of some elaborate ceremony they didn't understand. The black metal caught the colored light from the stained glass windows, casting rainbow shadows across the altar. Lucas, what are you doing? Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. What I should have done from the beginning, Lucas replied, his voice hollow. The charming facade had completely crumbled, revealing a man pushed beyond his breaking point. You want the truth? Fine. Here's the truth. He turned the gun toward Nathaniel, his hand remarkably steady despite the wildness in his eyes. My father spent 20 years planning this moment. 20 years of waiting, plotting, sacrificing everything for revenge. And you think I'm going to let you walk away now? Lucas, please. Sophie started to move toward him, but he swung the gun back in her direction. Don't move. Don't speak. Just listen. Tears were streaming down his face now. Do you want to know what it was like growing up as Victor Cross's son? Do you want to know what it was like watching my mother waste away because she couldn't handle the shame of being married to a criminal? Father Mackenzie tried to step forward. Son, whatever's troubling you, stay back. Lucas's voice cracked like a whip. All of you, stay exactly where you are. The elderly priest raised his hands peacefully and stepped back. In the pews, wedding guests were beginning to panic, some reaching for their phones, others preparing to run. You destroyed my family, Lucas continued, his attention fixed on Nathaniel. Your precious mother destroyed us. And you got to live your perfect life while my father became a broken man. I know what my mother did, Nathaniel said carefully, his hands visible and non-threatening. And you're right. It was unforgivable, but Sophie had nothing to do with that. She was a baby, Lucas. She's as much a victim of Evelyn's crimes as your family was. Is she? Lucas laughed bitterly. She grew up poor. Sure, but she always had hope. She always believed her father was out there somewhere, maybe looking for her. My father knew his reputation was destroyed forever. He knew he'd never clear his name, never get his life back. Victor Cross had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of pride and growing alarm. Lucas, that's enough. Put the gun down. This wasn't part of the plan, wasn't it? Lucas turned to face his father without lowering the weapon. You wanted revenge against the Graysons. You wanted them to suffer like we suffered. Well, here's your chance. Not like this, Victor said, his voice urgent. This isn't justice. It's murder. Justice. Lucas's voice rose to near hysteria. There is no justice, there never was. You taught me that every day for 20 years. You told me the Graysons were evil, that they deserved to be destroyed, that nothing we did to them could be too cruel. Sophie could see the exact moment when Lucas's grip on reality finally snapped. His face went blank, emotionless, as he turned the gun back toward Nathaniel. Lucas, don't do this, she pleaded. Please, if you ever loved me. I did love you, he said quietly. That was the problem. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you. I was supposed to use you and discard you. But you were so pure, so genuinely good for a few weeks. You made me believe I could be someone better than my father's son." He steadied his aim, pointing the gun directly at Nathaniel's heart. "But I am my father's son, and this ends now. If you shoot him, you'll have to shoot me too," Sophie said, her voice calm despite the terror coursing through her veins. "Because I'll never stop hunting you. I'll never stop fighting for justice. You'll have to kill us both. Maybe that's for the best," Lucas said, and Sophie saw him make his decision. In that instant, she understood what her mother must have felt in those final moments. The absolute clarity that comes when love demands everything. Without hesitation, Sophie threw herself between Lucas and Nathaniel just as the gun fired. The sound was deafening in the vaulted space of the church. Screams erupted from the wedding guests as they dove for cover. But Sophie felt no impact, no burning pain of a bullet wound. Instead, she found herself catching Grace Harper as her aunt collapsed against her, blood spreading across the front of her hospital gown. "Aunt Grace?" Sophie's voice was high and disbelieving. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in the hospital." "Couldn't let him hurt you," Grace whispered. Her breathing labored, blood frothed at the corners of her mouth. "When I heard about the wedding, I had to come." Behind them, chaos erupted as several wedding guests, who Sophie now realized were plainclothes police officers, tackled Lucas to the ground. The gun skittered across the marble floor, coming to rest against the altar steps. "How did you get here?" Sophie cradled her aunt's head in her lap, pressing her hands against the spreading bloodstain. "Sweet nurse, helped me escape." Grace's voice was fading. "Helen. She lost her daughter too, she understood." Nathaniel dropped to his knees beside them, pulling off his jacket to help staunch the bleeding. "Grace, stay with us. The ambulance is coming." "No," Grace said with surprising firmness. "My time was already up. Better this way. Protecting family." "Don't say that," Sophie sobbed. "You're going to be fine. We're going to get you to the hospital." "Sophie?" Grace's hand found her niece's cheek, fingers trembling but warm. "Listen to me. Your mother. She would be so proud. You chose love. Over revenge you chose. To protect instead of destroy. Aunt Grace, please." "The letters," Grace continued, her voice growing weaker. "In my house, your mother's jewelry box. There are more letters. Things she wanted. To tell you when you were older." Sophie nodded through her tears, afraid to speak and interrupt what might be Grace's final words. "And Nathaniel." Grace turned her fading gaze to him. "She loved you. Until the end. Every day. She loved you." Nathaniel's composure finally cracked. "I know. I should have fought harder for her. I should have protected her." "You're protecting her now," Grace whispered, "by loving Sophie, the way Elena always hoped you would." The sound of sirens was growing louder outside, but Grace was running out of time. She struggled to lift her head, looking between Sophie and Nathaniel with the last of her strength. "Promise me," she gasped. "Promise me you'll take care of each other. You're all, the family, either of you, has left. I promise," Nathaniel said, his voice broken. "I promise," Sophie echoed. Grace smiled then, a peaceful expression settling over her features. "Good. Elena can. Rest now. We're all together." Her hand slipped from Sophie's cheek as the light faded from her eyes. For a moment, the church was silent, except for Sophie's quiet sobs and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Then Nathaniel gently closed Grace's eyes and pulled Sophie into his arms, holding his daughter as she grieved for the woman who had raised her with such fierce, protective love. Across the church, Victor Cross knelt beside his son, who was being handcuffed by police officers. Lucas looked up at his father with eyes that seemed suddenly very young. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't be the instrument of revenge you needed." Victor stared at his son for a long moment. Then, at Grace's still form. Then at Sophie crying in her father's arms. 20 years of hatred and planning had led to this moment, and all he felt was empty. "No," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I made you into one." As the paramedics rushed in, and the police began processing the scene, Sophie clung to Nathaniel and whispered a promise to Grace's memory. "I won't let your sacrifice be wasted. I won't let revenge poison another generation. The cycle of violence that had claimed Elena and now Grace would end here, with forgiveness instead of vengeance. It's what both women would have wanted. 3 months later, the autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and new beginnings as Sophie walked through Mount Auburn Cemetery, her footsteps soft on the gravel path. In her arms, she carried 2 bouquets, white roses for her mother, yellow chrysanthemums for Grace. Nathaniel walked beside her in comfortable silence, their relationship still fragile but growing stronger each day. Learning to be father and daughter after 26 years of separation required patience, forgiveness, and the gradual building of trust that had been shattered by decades of lies. I still can't believe they're both here, Sophie said softly as they approached the twin headstones. Elena Harper's grave was older, weathered by 23 years of Boston winters. Grace's was new, the granite still gleaming in the afternoon sun. Grace Harper, beloved sister, devoted guardian, protector of love. Elena Harper, taken too soon, loved forever. Her spirit lives on in her daughter. Nathaniel had paid for both headstones. Insisting it was the least he could do, he'd also established the Elena and Grace Harper Foundation for victims of domestic violence and family manipulation, a cause that felt appropriate, given how his mother's machinations had destroyed so many lives. They're together now, Nathaniel said, placing his own flowers at Elena's grave. Grace spent 26 years taking care of Elena's daughter. Now, Elena can take care of Grace. Sophie knelt between the graves, arranging the flowers with care. I found another letter last week, she said. In Mom's jewelry box, just like Grace said, it was addressed to me for my 25th birthday. What did it say? Sophie pulled a folded paper from her jacket pocket. Even now, 3 months after Grace's death, reading her mother's words still brought tears to her eyes. My darling Sophie, if you're reading this, it means Grace kept her promise to give you these letters when you were old enough to understand. By now, you know the truth about your father. Not because I told you, but because life has a way of bringing together the people who belong with each other. Nathaniel listened intently as Sophie continued reading. I need you to know that leaving Nathaniel was the hardest thing I ever did, but staying would have put you in danger. Evelyn Grayson was a woman who would stop at nothing to protect her family's reputation, and I couldn't risk her turning that ruthlessness on an innocent child. Elena was protecting you even before you were born, Nathaniel said softly. There's more, Sophie said, her voice thick with emotion. But I want you to know that you were created from love. Pure, honest, overwhelming love. Your father is a good man, Sophie. If you ever meet him, if fate brings you together despite my choices, please don't judge him for my absence. Judge him by his actions toward you. Sophie folded the letter carefully. She knew, somehow. She knew we'd find each other. They stood in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The cemetery was peaceful, with only the distant sounds of traffic and the rustle of leaves in the wind to break the quiet. Have you heard anything about Lucas? Sophie asked eventually. Nathaniel nodded grimly. He's been sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. Victor got 10 years as an accessory. The prosecutor wanted to charge them both with Grace's death, but she threw herself in front of that bullet voluntarily, Sophie finished. I know. I testified at the sentencing hearing. I told them that Lucas never intended to hurt Grace. He was aiming for you. That was generous of you, Sophie shrugged. Grace always said that hatred was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I won't poison myself with anger toward Lucas. What he did was unforgivable, but he was as much a victim of his father's obsession as I was. You visited him, didn't you? Sophie nodded. Once, last month, he's not the same person I fell in love with. Prison has broken something in him. Or maybe he was already broken, and I just couldn't see it. What did you tell him? That I forgave him. That I hoped he could find peace somehow. Sophie's voice was steady. And I told him that Grace's last words were asking us to take care of each other instead of destroying each other, I think. I think it gave him some comfort. They began walking back toward the cemetery entrance, where Nathaniel's car waited. The routine had become familiar over the past 3 months. Sunday visits to the graves, followed by lunch at the small cafe where Elena used to work. Then an afternoon at Nathaniel's house going through old photo albums and sharing memories. How are things at the company? Sophie asked as they drove through the quiet streets of Cambridge. Better than expected, the board was initially concerned about the scandal, but public sympathy has been overwhelmingly in our favor. Apparently, people appreciate honesty about past mistakes. Nathaniel glanced at her. Your speech at the press conference helped enormously. Sophie had been reluctant to speak publicly about the events at the church, but she'd eventually agreed to a single press conference where she'd talked about forgiveness, the importance of breaking cycles of revenge, and the need for corporations to take responsibility for past wrongs. The Elena Harper Scholarship Program launches next month, Nathaniel continued. Full rides to Boston University for young women from underprivileged backgrounds, I thought. I thought your mother would like that. She would love it, Sophie agreed. Education was everything to her. She used to say it was the one thing no one could take away from you. They pulled into the driveway of Nathaniel's Beacon Hill townhouse, a beautiful 19th century building that had been in the Grayson family for 4 generations. Sophie still felt slightly uncomfortable in the elegant surroundings, but she was gradually learning to think of it as home. There's something I want to show you, Nathaniel said as they entered the house. He led her to his study, where he'd been spending most of his time lately working on a project he'd been secretive about. On his desk lay a thick manuscript bound in leather. The title page read, The Elena Letters, a story of love, loss, and redemption, by Nathaniel Grayson. Sophie's breath caught. You're writing a book. I thought it was important to tell the whole story. Elena's story, Grace's story, yours. The proceeds will go to the foundation, and I hope it might help other families who've been torn apart by manipulation and lies. Sophie picked up the manuscript, flipping through pages filled with her father's careful handwriting. Have you shown this to anyone? Just my editor. She thinks it could help a lot of people. Nathaniel paused. I hope you don't mind. I know it's your story too. I don't mind, Sophie said, still turning pages. But I want to help you finish it. There are things about Mom and Grace that only I know. Stories that should be included. I'd like that, Nathaniel said softly. I'd like that very much. Sophie set the manuscript down and walked to the window overlooking the garden, in the fading afternoon light. She could see the fountain that Nathaniel had recently had installed, a simple stone basin surrounded by Elena's favorite flowers. Do you think they're proud of us? She asked. Mom and Grace, do you think we're honoring their memory the right way? Nathaniel joined her at the window. I think Grace would be proud that we chose love over revenge. And I think Elena would be amazed that her daughter grew up to be so much stronger and wiser than either of us ever were. Sophie leaned against her father's shoulder, still getting used to the simple comfort of having family again. I miss them. I miss them too. But they're not really gone, are they? Elena lives on in you. In your kindness, your determination, your capacity for forgiveness. And Grace's love surrounds us every day. As if to prove his point, the setting sun caught Elena's heart-shaped locket around Sophie's neck, the one piece of jewelry that had survived all the years of poverty and struggle. Inside was a photo of Elena holding baby Sophie, both of them smiling with pure joy. I love you, Dad, Sophie said quietly. It was still strange to say the word, but it felt right. I love you too, sweetheart, more than I ever thought possible. Outside the window, the fountain bubbled peacefully in the gathering dusk, and somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring. Not for a wedding this time, but for evening prayers, for gratitude, for second chances and new beginnings. The past couldn't be changed, but the future stretched ahead full of possibility. And for the first time in either of their lives, Sophie and Nathaniel faced that future together, as the family Elena had always dreamed they could be.